Hello, everyone, and welcome to another CANNAtalk session. Summer's coming to an end. The cooler temperatures are coming. What does that mean? It means harvest time for outdoor cultivation. So we thought we would kick off this new season of CANNAtalk with an outdoor conversation. But before I get going, I'd like to have a little housekeeping things. I'd like to thank CANNA for being leaders of organizing these types of events and educating us and supporting and developing our industry. So, outdoor cultivation, it obviously offers great advantages. You know, you leverage the scale, the volume, the reduced input costs compared to indoors and greenhouse. But despite these benefits, success in the outdoor growing, it still requires some planning and some strategic execution. So we thought we'd bring in some panelists to talk about that today. And I just want to add that this is an interactive session. And for whoever is listening, you can if you're watching in full screen, uh, you don't want to scroll around, you can use the QR code on the top right with your mobile device, and you can ask a question that I can ask as we go. So we highly encourage that. But you can also scroll down on your window and pose your question there at the on the bottom. Otherwise than that, everybody's muted except the panelists and myself. And it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists today. First is Aron Tegenfeldt. He's the CCO at Herbal Dispatch. They are located in Richmond, BC, in operation since 2015. Herbal Dispatch has been leading the charge for craft cannabis in Canada. Their mission is simple: to provide their members with access to the best quality, small batch cannabis in Canada. Next, we have Greg Kasting, sorry. He's the CEO of Cedar Organics. Cedar Organics, they're located in Quesnel Lake in sunny Cedar on Vancouver Island, British Columbia. The Cedar region is known for its rich agriculture heritage, including BC bud, and the land that has been working farm for over 50 years, and they are 100% organically certified grown cannabis. And last but not least, Alex Sneider. He's the COO of Rollganics. Uh, all three of the founders at Rollganics have had a lifelong passion for cannabis and were some of Michigan's first caregivers. So yes, we do have a panelist from the US. Very much looking forward to get that feedback and their market review. But their passion at Rollganics for growing quality cannabis has led them at using organic living soil with no pesticide or herbicide and improving industry harvest techniques. This ensures that they sell product that they would not smoke, they would only smoke themselves. So, outdoor production, let's get right into it. So, Greg, I'll start with you. First of all, thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit more about Cedar Organics, how long you've been licensed, the size of the field, the operation, what the facility, what your yearly expected volume, what the type of business that you're trying to run there?
So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. Cedar Organics was licensed in 2020. We're a family farm. We have about 37 acres. That is, let's call it, part of the official secured facility. We grow on about 28 acres. We have a 4,200 square foot processing facility. We typically plant about 30 to 35,000 plants a year. That generates us somewhere between 25 to 30,000 kilos of fresh flower. Our strategy is to freeze it. So we want, within 30 minutes of it being harvested off the field, we want it in a freezer. We have a storage capacity for up to 40,000 kilograms of fresh frozen. What we focus on in our facility is the production of live hash rosin. So we have developed through a very long, painful trial and error process of ice water extraction. We basically wash approximately 135 to 150 kilos a day, and turning that into bubble hash, and eventually putting it into live rosin. We hope with our entire yield to produce somewhere between 700 to 1,000 kilos, or the equivalent, into live rosin. So, I guess that's
Wow.
I'll leave it there.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, thank you. Lots of numbers. Quite a large operation. It's not a small operation. 35,000 plants. So you're going full fresh frozen live rosin. That's 100% of your market. Just to confirm.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
excellent.
That's our strategy.
And why that strategy? How did you come up? Was that from the get go? Like when you first started your first plant, was that going to be fresh frozen right from the get go, and it has not shifted from that?
We kind of stumbled into it as we were building our facility, when we were looking at a crop that size and how do we deal with it. And then we were looking at the cost of, let's call it, traditional drying, and the investment that would be required, and the risks associated with dealing with that amount of biomass so quickly.
Mm,
We basically thought the quickest way to ensure that we can protect and minimize the risk of harming our crop was to freeze it right away. And so, and
okay.
then, of course, being able to focus on, let's call it, the champagne of cannabis products, that was very, very appealing at the very beginning, that, to go in that direction.
Okay. Excellent. So Alex, I'm going to throw it to you. So we got the Canadian perspective of an outdoor grower. So very similar question to you. Kind of flex your muscle on Rollganics. Tell us all about them. What kind of market you're playing into, and the volumes and things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And kind of similar story to Nino, or sorry, Nico.
Greg.
What's the name? Greg. Sorry about that. Nico and Greg, right? But kind of very similar story. But I personally found bubble hash, early on when I was in my teenage years, growing in my mom's closet, having too much byproduct. I have some bubble hash, and let's make some bubble hash. And so, I was one of the first people to use bubble bags and try to make some, extracts out of it, try to make my own BHO. That's where people even had dab rigs, and they were terrified. They're like, "Oh, there's no way I'm going to smoke that. It's like crack." Now it's like you just said, like the champagne, like Greg was just saying. And after a while, eventually, with technology advancing, people realized that they could take the bubble hash and press it and make quality live rosin. So at that time, I was a caregiver actually in Colorado, and I had a living organic indoor small caregiver grow. And I had some people that grew outside in California and Michigan. I always thought the best flower from a consumer standpoint came from sun grown material that was harvested properly. And this is like a key point with outdoor, is why I think a lot of consumers like Greg and other business owners will lean more towards fresh frozen versus smokable flower. Even though I think the best smokable flower comes from outdoors, we don't produce any. We produce fresh frozen. In the future, ideally, we could do some more smokable flower, but I'd like to have an environmentally controlled atmosphere. So right now, we're sitting on 17 acres of fully licensed and cultivated area. We got 200 acres total, so we can expand, significantly. But as if right now, this is plenty of material for us to grow. Almost 100 different genetics, and so we really are flavor hunters and strain hunters, and like to not only just have that champagne, but we want to have a unique champagne that not everyone else has. And we're taking genetics, breeding them accordingly. So one, they grow stronger and better in our environment. Two, we can take a lemon and a strawberry, cross it together, and make our strawberry lemonade. But so we've got a lot of potential to expand, and I believe the best concentrates come from outside, and so that's why we've always kind of focused on that. And I'm more of a concentrate smoker myself, and it's just a passion. So that's why I like. If it was just my business to try to be profitable, we'd maybe lean towards less strains. But also, I think it helps us on the back end to have a wider portfolio of strains. I can launch some spring strains, some October strains, and just different things that resonate with the consumer during those time frames. And through this process of starting the farm, I linked up with BC Bubbleman, obviously the inventor of bubble bags. That was one of the first products I used. And we got the exclusive rights and his SOPs, his processing techniques, his branding, his products for the state. So we have the Rollganic brand, which is our affordable brand, our in-house brand that we do everything, from growing it to processing it, genetics. And then the Boatman brand is essentially the same thing, everything solventless, but premium brand. And Rollganic, we do produce hydrocarbon, but 8,000 plants. We're harvesting right now. We're averaging 15 to 19 pounds right, per plant, trimmed and bagged. It's insane. This is the best, craziest year I could have ever asked for. Last year we averaged 40,000 pounds, really about 45,000 pounds off the field. It'll definitely be close to 100, 120,000 this year easily. And I'll probably put about 30,000 of it towards solventless because demands and capacity, and I'll probably put the remaining amount towards hydrocarbon, where we have a very affordable live resin lineup and live resin disposables, 510 carts, and essentially everything across the board. That's long story short. That's us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But you did mention, and maybe I didn't catch that right. You mentioned that you freeze right away, but you may dry for dry flower sales. So do you
Yeah.
do
So
dry flower as well?
to elaborate on that, why I think a lot of people do that is um, growing cannabis outdoors on a large scale is kind of like landing a Boeing 747. When you're trying to grow or dry for smokable flower, if you over dry your material, you run short of the runway, you're going to crash that plane. If you go past the runway, you're going to get microbials and a nasty basement stagnant taste and just not the product. So in Michigan, people sell crash planes, and because that's just a business and that's all they have because they don't know what they're doing. And then people then, associate that crash plane with Greg's and my product and say, oh no, it's outdoor, it's not as good. Like, no, we
Yeah.
actually land our planes. And so when you're looking at an outdoor level, I do believe the best smokable flower comes from sun grown. But landing that plane on a commercial scale, once you move to fresh frozen, that runway gets longer. Essentially,
Yeah.
all we have to do is chop it, clean it, freeze it within a 30-minute period, 15 as fast as we possibly can. It's a revolving door. If any one of those steps has a kink or a bottleneck, everything essentially stops until that's fixed and they're frozen. And so once you freeze it, it's now on the runway, and as long as you maintain the cold cycle, it never becomes unthawed from storage to transportation
Hmm.
to pulling out, loading up your ospreys or hashtags or whatever equipment you have, and maintaining that cold chain is easier. So that's why I think a lot of large scale consumers or business owners have pivoted that way because the time
Hmm.
frame and just the amount that you can process. Also, dry space. If you have 5 semi trucks, 53 feet long, two
Yeah,
40-foot
exactly.
Connex freezers, electric, and so it's a lot of freezer space, but it's even more dry space. I have about 120 people that will pull in throughout the harvest season. And if I were to do smokable flower, I think I would have to times that by two or three. Labor
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
incredibly
exactly.
difficult, in this industry, and there's more machines
Hmm.
coming out to make it easier scalable, but it's just easier to land that plane when you're doing fresh frozen. And I do believe it makes a better quality extract than anything grown
Yeah.
indoors with the way the stock produces turkeys.
That's it's very interesting as you did mention. I like that you mentioned because I got a question from the audience, and you mentioned the cost of drying and this and that because the question is more like a comment. It's like wonder how much it costs to run those freezers. So obviously, these outdoors growers, you've done the math comparing to drying and storage compared to freezing and what you explained on the labor to be able to do all that. I mean, it is a big giant plane. It's not a little Cessna that's coming in. It's not 10 Cessnas coming in one day at a time. It's a giant 737 landing every day, right? So yeah, I'm sure. So can Greg, can you comment quickly? Have you you guys decided to go fresh frozen as well because of the drying space and all that? That was obviously the biggest consideration, right? The cost of drying
No,
compared to the
absolutely.
cost of freezing.
Yeah. So, in terms of the cost of keeping it frozen, we probably spend about 10 grand a month on doing that. Of course, now we're getting a little bit smarter. So, for example, in the winters, we don't need to have our freezers on 24/7. So we find it when it drops down to, minus 10, we kick it back on. And it took us 3 years to figure that one out to save a lot of
That's a
money.
good
But
one.
yeah.
Diesel or electric?
Uh, Basically, we had propane. Sorry, not propane, natural gas. Um, us freezing has been our Achilles heel because we did a wrong investment into our generators. And so we bought natural gas generators and we got lemons. So now we're actually using diesel generators. Since we are a farm without three-phase access or connection. So now the diesel prices actually are relatively reasonable. And a few years ago, they were much more expensive. So,
Right.
yeah, so it's a constant issue for us.
But in short, I mean, there is a monthly cost compared to the drying of an outdoor. It's a very high initial cost, but then there's less cost throughout the year. Another question from the audience. So somebody's asking 10,000 plants per harvest? Question mark, question mark. So can you just quickly in a day, Greg, and Aron, I'm not trying to keep you out. I'm going to get to you really shortly. So Greg, how many plants do you, like you say, it freezes every within 30 minutes. So how many plants do you chop down in a day? Just quickly.
We're basically chopping down somewhere between 800 to 1,200 plants a day.
And
And
Alex?
what we're doing is we basically putting in about 35,000 plants. We actually don't harvest them because we are in a climatic zone where the rains can come early. And that's the whole aspect. I don't know about Michigan, but Mother Nature has not treated us well over the last 4 years. So we're having to leave plants on the field many times. So
Yeah.
it's a race against time.
Alex, how many
Yeah.
plants do you run in a day?
So it depends how many people we have that day, but typical goal would be 200 to 800 plants. If I've got 20 people versus 120, and also we have a staggered harvest. We're further north of Michigan. We're not as far as Canada, so I imagine you're really limited on the genetics you can grow. But we have some early flowering genetics, and then some mid-October genetics, and some late flowering genetics. So
you stagger.
we don't have to put it all in at one time. And so as long as we always gear our genetics correctly, with our team, we should be able to harvest. We brought 120 people, and I could harvest the entire field in 10 days. Really, maybe 12 days.
Wow.
And that's going to be 12, 14 hour days. But
Yeah.
our system is so dialed in this year. Like, there's 20 basically different departments between start to finish that someone's
Quite refined.
head at, and it's something different when you scale it to this level for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you. Aron, nice to have you on the panel. Thank you very much. Who is Herbal Dispatch and how do you fit into this outdoor conversation? I'm going to kind of throw it vague at you on this one because we had great conversations. So,
Sure. Thanks for having me. Herbal Dispatch is a licensed marketplace. Basically, we have medical sales license, recreational sales license, processing license, and as a result of the first couple, we were also able to export. So that's kind of our 4 streams of revenue. I'm the buyer or the buyer seller here. And I did, so Herbal Dispatch was started in 2015. That's kind of prior to legalization. It was a famous mail order marijuana or MOM here in Canada. And then a couple of years ago, we brought it into the legal space, and with it, launched our medical platforms, got a few medical sites and then recreational sites to get product into the liquor channels and boards, et cetera, across the country. We do some processing work, i.e., pre-rolls, bagging, tagging, that sort of stuff. And then, as I mentioned, the export. So I actually had a number of years of experience in outdoor cultivation and sales prior to legalization. So I'm a good, I guess, person here in the company to push for outdoor purchasing and sales. I love outdoor for extracts. Proves to be great for pre-rolls. And in Canada, because we had so much overproduction in the first years of legalization, outdoor kind of took a back seat for flower in a bag or flower for smoking purposes, because there was just so much available cheap indoor flower. And through the last several years of kind of bankruptcies and changes within the industry, a lot of that overproduction has now been spoken for or purchased and sold. So I feel like really this is the year where we'll start seeing a lot more outdoor sales. And Greg, I work with Greg. We know each other from the platform and from the industry. And ever since I met him, I've been bugging him to fire up his drying barns. And so he can, I'm sure, attest to that. And hopefully that starts happening in the future, because I feel we need more dried outdoor flower.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I follow the market quite a bit, especially on the trading side of thing, and I think there is a gap. But before we get into gaps of supply chain and whatnot, and really hone in on the outdoor, a couple more questions, which I'm really very impressed, and keep them coming. The questions from the audience. Aron, are there any concentrate extract products that are GMP, either produced in Canada for export purposes that you know of?
You know, not that I am working on personally yet, but I do feel it's coming. We do have the ability to use GACP flour, or as a good agricultural collection practice flour, for extracts, which have been exported for sure. I mean, and if you look at even our website, which has hundreds of SKU within the concentrate category, there's a large number of them that have come from outdoor extraction for GPP or domestic sales, and GACP for export for sure.
Okay, so obviously a little bit easier to move GACP flour, dried flour, than a finished product right now. Kind of what we're seeing.
I think that the export market is in its infancy. So depending on the creativity of the buyers or the markets that it's going to, GACP extracted flour has definitely been involved in exports.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, let's jump right into the gap of a supply chain. Do you see that you're a buyer processor, like you said, so you're very much attuned to it? In your point of view, do you see gaps in our supply chain of any sort? And I think I know the answer, but is this something that could be fulfilled with the outdoor flower? And if so, what do we need to do to get that message out?
Well, I think it's interesting. Greg and I have discussed this more than once, but when the licensing for outdoor cultivation went through, there was no requirement to have a drying facility to go with it. You could fresh freeze it. I think as a result, a lot of people didn't invest in that, and also the price per gram on fresh frozen was really juicy back then, and it's changed a bit. For ourselves, we do a lot of flower sales, like for inhalation. And the last couple of years was very easy to buy indoor flower for below the cost of production. That is changing. I feel like it's flipping more to a seller's market now. And so that means that that cheap product below the cost of production won't be available anymore. And as a result, outdoor and greenhouse, I think we're going to see in bags more and more. And it's certainly the basis for pre-rolls, infused pre-rolls, and more pre-rolls to come.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Greg, back to you. So you've concentrated your market segment on the extraction, the fresh frozen, and rosin. That's been your success in the market so far. But have you seen changes throughout that may sway you, i.e., Aaron, giving you the grits on the side to dry more flour? Are you seeing a change that is actually worth you looking into? And do you anticipate any changes in the future? Like, are we going to get that communication across? Are we going to start seeing that demand go up?
Uh, Absolutely. Our first sales, whether it would be bubble hash, fresh frozen, or live rosin, in 2021, what I'm selling now, the price is 1/5 of what it was 3 years ago.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so the business model is completely on its head, where it doesn't make sense to, in many cases, to produce such a large amount of fresh frozen. I mean, of live rosin. The other issue that we have, and I attribute it to the provincial buying regime that they have here, is the entire Canadian market is geared towards cheap flavored vodka. They don't want it's a lot of it because of our lack of ability to advertise and market. There's still a very large, by the mass market, a misunderstanding or a lack of knowledge on what live rosin is. And because the um, industry is really struggling so hard, you have a lot of players in the market that are blurring the lines. They will infuse the live rosin with distillate, increase the potency, add some terpenes, and still call it live hash rosin. And so, and it's this, the bubble market, the bubble hash market has completely collapsed in Canada because they're taking keef and mixing it with distillate or crude oil and calling it hash and selling it for $1 or $2 a gram. And so, I used to sell bubble hash for $8 to $10 a gram, and uh, maybe $2 or $3 now, and it's just not demanded. And
That's
so,
interesting
yes,
because, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
On that,
yeah.
Greg,
So,
I just want to highlight
and
that it's
dried
kind of
flour
interesting.
definitely. Please, Alex, go ahead.
In Michigan, I've seen a lot of rosin companies, and it's the supply and demand. Whether it's fresh frozen or smokable flour, there's always just different times something else is in high demand, low supply, vice versa. And it seems because a lot of these indoor grows have been large scale, huge scale, that at this point, a lot of them are basically, even if they're drying it, selling it to some processors that are getting it for a good deal, smokable flour, and they're processing it as a cured, since it's made from smokable flour, dried, and selling it as live rosin or live or bubble hash, and it's made from a dried product, which is just not going to have as much terpenes, just not going to be as good of a product. And so, at the end of the day, this is the Michigan market. And it sounds like it could be your market as well. I'm not familiar with it at all, but there's a lot of people with a little bit of money in Michigan and a little bit of people with a lot of money. And you also compare it to the craft sales for beers. At the end of the day, 15-20% sales for craft beer in that state, they're doing really good. But the rest of everyone else, they're playing the margin game. And there's no question for the Rollganic, the Bowman brand, anybody to succeed, you're going to have to play the margin game. And hopefully consumers do get wise of companies like I don't want to throw their full name out there, but in person, I definitely throw it out to everyone. And any bud tender, I point that pen out and say, look on the back of it. It says distillate infused. It's not rosin. It's not the same as ours. It's going to give you a harsh
Mhm.
taste, a cough. It doesn't have full spectrum effect. And you're right. We're in a developing, market that it's changing. And honestly, the people that are winning the most are the ones that are doing shady things or abusing loopholes. It seems like.
Mhm.
Yeah. Honestly, we do see the same trends in Canada. What I always like to do, and I've been doing this for years, I look at the more mature markets of the US because they're smaller demographics, they mature a lot quicker, in my opinion. And start seeing the different trends show up a lot more. Hence why we have you on the panel here today. We really wanted to bring that US perspective. And you kind of gave me a little segue to your next question, Alex, is, how has the retail, you kind of answered a little bit, but the question was, how has the retail landscape changed over the years, and how has this affected the production plan and execution at Rollganics? um, so yeah,
I
have
would
you
say with
shifted drastically?
I mean, at the end of the day, our goal for Rollganic, as me being a lifetime consumer, was I wanted someone to get a full spectrum live rosin product and still take their kid to a baseball game, their girlfriend to a movie. That was my overall goal. So there's no question we've achieved that because the Michigan market has forced us to, stay relative in pricing, and it's just what's happened. But for the most part, we're not making as much as really we're profitable, and that's what I can say. We're not we don't have any debt. We self funded this with us and family, and everything has been paid off entirely. And everyone that I'm hearing else out there, they hear that story and they're like, "Alex, you're doing amazing." Because other than some few dispensary owners or some really big brands like Wild or Cedar that have a huge market share, a huge marketing, campaign, those are the only guys really making lots of money in this industry. Everyone thinks you're
Mm-hmm.
making tons of money, and that's probably the most frustrating thing. But we're not. We're out here running a normal business with normal margins now. 5 years ago, like Greg said, if we would have done what we did now, we would, be doing really well. I've talked to companies that have been in the market for, this is our third year that we're actually owned it. A company, don't want to say their name, but essentially they've almost doubled to triple their plant growth. They started with 4,000 plants. Now they're at 80,000 plants, and they expect to make the same money off that 80,000 plants as they did the 4,000 the first year. And they keep
Right, right.
scaling it. And, supply and demand, I don't even know if we've reached the bottom yet, which if you're a
Mm-hmm.
consumer, this is great. You just have to be a knowledgeable consumer because there's some BS products out there. But if you're a knowledgeable consumer in Michigan, I think it's the best state there, California, Oregon. But if you're a business owner, there needs to be some regulations. There needs to be some more knowledge, and the market's
Mm-hmm.
forever changing. And hopefully, even though it's going down that way towards more of a margin game, that's always what I was doing with Rollganic anyway. As far as the more premier brands, it's more difficult to really capture that audience. But I think Marcus has the following because he invented bubble bags, and so I have a huge
Yeah.
advantage as far as connecting with that audience because of him. And so I'm very thankful for that.
So I'm really happy you mentioned the margin gain because Aaron, I don't know if you saw, but last week or the week before, Headset did a report on the cannabis industry in Canada, and pre rolls have surpassed the dry flower category for the first time. And I anticipate that trend to get wider and wider as we go. And I'm giving you an opportunity to give another plug here to indoors, um, to outdoor production. Sorry, because do you think the indoor production and greenhouse can actually sustain this pre-roll? It's not. I wouldn't even call it a trend. A very very strong market segment. Do you think that that's going to keep going from the indoor? In your opinion, with the price compressions that we're seeing today?
Yeah, the pre-roll category is growing like crazy here, and it's not just for cheaper value pre-rolls actually, which I think people most of the time had kind of a bad stigma about pre-rolls. We are doing like really high-end flour for pre-rolls, full bud. Sorry, we invested in that Roll Pro machine, the Blackbird, which actually kind of grinds and rolls, and like we need kind of juicy or humidity enriched flour, 12% humidity, 11% humidity, and indoor flour does Of course, amazing that when we want to use it, but outdoor does as well. So the machine loves to eat up outdoor, loves to eat up greenhouse. And definitely that's where we see kind of like larger value packs, maybe 10, 20, 30, 40 pre-rolls at a time. But yes, the category in general is hot, and I do see a major home for outdoor and greenhouse within it as well.
So, okay, how do we market it as outdoor, or do we just not say it and just say it's pre-roll, or do we bring that message to the market? Because I'm with you. I've been battling this outdoor is not good quality weed for years, right? And I'm just wondering what needs to be done to start balancing this market, because we're
Yeah, we
taking,
wonder
in
about
my
that too.
opinion,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. Yeah, I was just saying that we've been arguing about that for. We have in-house brands, we have brands that we process for or kind of source and sell for. Right. Internally, we like the term sun-kissed, sun-grown, that kind of thing. We feel has a nice sound and demeanor to it. However, we also know it turns people off too. So we're trying to actually sell and market both by indicating or just by not talking about it and then just seeing what the market says. So we do with like our medical platforms and with our direct delivery to store platforms, we get, you know, quite a lot of data and quite a lot of feedback. So we can test a brand that talks about being sun-kissed and then also a brand that doesn't. And we're just trying to see which one is getting the best reception.
I,
Greg,
I just have to throw
so
one thing there real quick, Nico. I know a
yeah.
company that actually has a large outdoor grow and a medium-sized to small indoor grow and doesn't post anything about their outdoor grow ever. And then obviously they're selling that smokable flower, they're selling the fresh frozen, the rosin, the extracts, everything under that premium name indoor brand. And that is a
Yeah.
great question to ask any yourself or any business owner. And me personally, I just believe to do the right thing. And that's what, maybe you don't have to put it front and center, but obviously if someone asks, you should say it's sun grown, and, that's the truth behind it. But there's definitely companies out there that have seen that hurdle. And what do? They just directly lie and put up a small grow and just put a facade in front of the consumer to
But
get that extra dollar price point.
is it really lying? Because I'm getting a whole bunch of questions right now, and I'm going to get to them about quality and expectations and this and that. Is it really lying if the end user, the consumer, is happy with what's in the bag? I mean, it's not really lying. It's just not disclosing. And I'm sure there's food companies out there that don't disclose everything they do and how they do it. Um, so I just want to
Absolutely,
get to
but
Greg on this. So Greg, do you see the same stigma? Because you don't really sell dry flower right now; it's more on the rosin. And do you see a stigma, or is this an advantage, the outdoor qualification for your type of
No, it's
product?
absolutely a stigma in this
It
day and
is.
age, especially in the
Ash Play.
dried flower. They don't want outdoor dried flower. That's cheap. It should be 25, 30 cents a gram. Since I'm organic, that's what I try and push. Um, and just to actually add on to what Alex was saying, there's one of the major players, and I know it quite well. They bought a craft grower on the island, and they're sending product from their let's say mass produced facility to the craft grower, keeping it in their vaults, and then all of a sudden now it's coming out of that craft grower. And so that at the end of the day, it's good flour, yada yada yada, but they're selling it as a craft premium when it has nothing to do that. And unfortunately, I think this is actually what the market needs is some type of self-regulating body that truly holds people to what they're actually putting, because there are so many loopholes the way in which with the regulations with Health Canada, like you don't need to say if it's live resin, cured resin, rosin, or distillate. All you need to say on there is that it's an extract, legally speaking.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah.
and many people, again, it's because of the industry is so dysfunctional right now. And, and I don't even know if it's bad actor. It's more of survival, unfortunately, right now.
Yeah. Alex, just quickly
So
on
there is
that, like,
a stigma with outdoor,
sorry.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Alex, do you see the same stigma? Because I know that you guys do sell dried flower, so you're obviously able. Are you labeling it as your outdoor, or you just it's part of your brand?
I mean, we would definitely it's part of our Rollganic brand if it is. And as you kind of see from our logo, we've got the rows of our outdoor field and just a big giant cola. We're not hiding anything. And, but there's definitely that stigma. And one of the biggest things, in my opinion, is if you take the trichomes when you properly process it outside bubble hash, and I'll do the same thing inside, and then I'll show those trichomes to you, or you go find me anybody, and as long as we do a good job processing it inside or outside, I challenge you to tell me which ones are inside or outside. And also when you look at the fact the sun produces a wider variety of spectrum than any indoor light, period. The end of the day. Even if you have LED lights, HPS, and metal high life, and all these together at the same time, if you incorporate the sun grown, sure, it's you're gonna be able to add a wider spectrum of terpenes, and that's
Yeah,
like I said at the beginning, we're flavor chasers, and I've seen the results of strains grown inside versus outside. They definitely generally yield higher in terpenes outside, or as Aaron's saying, like I've been trying to use the term sun grown because it's just easier to get someone to accept and believe that's a high quality product versus outdoor.
mm, yeah. So, all right, Aaron. Now we've talked about, what we think is good weed, bad weed, or not good weed, and we can classify it all we want. The four of us can sit down and say this is good bud, bad bud, and we can agree or disagree and fight. However, question from, I'm going to, usually they're all anonymous, but this person called himself Bubble Man. So there's a question from Bubble Man here. How important is it to produce for the masses versus the few who actually want the highest quality? Do you go for the quality or the margins, and how do we balance that? And that, to me, I've said this before. I can be a snob. I can be a weed snob. I'm probably the worst market segment of it all. I'll pay for the premium weed, but I don't buy nearly as much because I'm too snobby. And then, right, there's other things. So how important is it to produce for the masses compared? So really it comes down to market analysis. And are we trying to tell the industry what they should smoke, or should we grow what they're asking for or supply what they're asking for? So, Aaron, comments on that? That's kind of a statement in itself, more than a question. But I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
the
the answer is
Walmart.
both. The answer is really both, right? On one hand, I guess the masses part is that there are just one category in Canada, cheap ounces, which are a major mover of dried flower, say 59, 79, and $99 ounces that used to be filled with, indoor weed from companies that were overproducing. Because that was good for their public market balance sheet, just to show the like large scale cultivation. They didn't have a business plan that related to actual sales. They weren't growing great quality weed, but it was cheap. And so what we found is we created these market segments at certain prices that nobody can fulfill anymore unless they're just into making product with no margin or loss in margin, negative margin. So I think as a result of that, for the masses, there's already like placeholders that will automatically be filled with outdoor or maybe greenhouse because the cost of production is lower and you can actually make money in those SKUs. There's lots of people out there who want sun-grown flower, but does that compare to the people who want high potency, cheap indoor flower? No. But what we've been talking about here as well is extracts. Outdoor flower makes awesome oil, makes awesome concentrates like these guys are doing for their business model. But it also makes awesome like RSO or Rick Simpson oil, Phoenix Tears, whatever you want to call it. And there's been a lack of that, I think, in the marketplace because it's from dried flower. And so, there was some indoor flower that would get turned into it. Now there's going to be more because there's more field crop trim and shake little buds, etc. I'm hopeful that we're going to see really nice honey oils and hash oils and RSOs come back into the marketplace, something that we haven't seen quite as much over the first couple of years of legalization. So, I mean, that's a roundabout way of still saying both, but
Yeah. But again, kind of to the headset report, it's calling for it's not lower grade weed, lower cost cannabis,
yeah,
right? That's what it's kind of saying. Um, I mean, are we stuck on trying to fill the premium market too much and not tailoring production properly? Because you could still, like, in my opinion, you can operate a greenhouse with, I wouldn't say lowering your standards, but it's a different way of producing where you're more concentrated on volume and no contamination and consistency to be able to fulfill a big gap. Um, so it's the one thing. There's another question, and then I'll pose it to you. So, lack of transparency is a major issue in the cannabis industry. In the lower 48, so in the U.S., environment matters more than it should, and quality is stuck on THC. Your thoughts? Because this kind of fits in with outdoor and THC. Like, are we going to break that market, or is this just all we have to do is grow 50-cent, 29% weed? Everybody?
I want to touch base on that for a second, but yeah, on the attacking the masses, obviously the market's going to really dictate, especially with dispensaries. Retail is going to dictate prices from lower to higher quality stuff. And so obviously, if you're just a brand like me, I have to fall in those ranges. I can't be significantly higher, and I sure as heck don't want to be significantly lower because I know my cost of goods to go into these products. And at the end of the day, like I said, we have our cost of goods to go in these products. To be in this high volume industry, you're looking at smaller margins. And it's honestly, even though I have a premium brand, we're still doing the same thing. The only difference is I have smaller batches, a higher cost that goes into it, more washing, better packaging, if there's different vapes, better premium hardware. So just there's more stuff that goes into it. So obviously we have to charge more for that brand. And then to elaborate on that THC part, a lot of consumers are actually purchasing online now. So take the Patient Station, for example. They're primarily 95% pickup. So you show up, they come out your car, and they give it to you. And they're really good at their online presence. And they tell me when consumers go to search concentrates, they one search concentrates, and they two filter it by THC. Okay, so just like Google, if you're not on the top 3 pages, they're not going to scroll to page 42 to see you. So it's unfortunate, but we know consumers are shopping by THC, and that's one of the things they care about. And so, it's something that in all of our products, we want it to be as flavorful as possible, but we also want to try to, definitely grow higher THC producing strains, just because that's what the market is asking for. And I think it'll eventually sway like Colorado to where they really request a lot of high THC products, high THC. And eventually, especially with distillate products, they realize, oh, wow, I'll get a more consistent, better high with a full spectrum product every time and a more full flavor every time. And so, there takes a while for the market to hopefully adjust. I'm hoping the Michigan market continues to grow. Just like you said, pre-rolls become more popular. I'm hoping full spectrum continues to gain more market share. And of the full spectrum, we ought to be producing a lot of vapes and on the go products like these hashes. So it's a product that consumers can basically just pull out, light with a big lighter, and being versatile. So attacking the market, and trying to put the right product in the best home is important, I think, for any brand and business to kind of succeed, to keep the cost down and make it the best product it possibly is. Without a lot of businesses will have, this is my product, I'm going to put it here because that's what we said it was going to do.
Exactly.
And oftentimes, cannabis or certain strains, you can't predict it until you cut it, and every year is different.
Aron, do you see the same trends as what Alex is explaining on the THC and that? And if so, that I guess that is the market we should be attacking, really. But do you see those same trends in Canada on your perspective?
Yeah, unfortunately, THC has been the marker or the gateway to sales, and um, and we keep hoping that's going to change. I feel it is changing a little bit. Like, for example, on our patient website or recreational website, you can also toggle by THC, but also by terpenes, and that is now becoming like quite important within the search. We can see the data from that, so that's nice to see. And then there's a lot of discussion about specific terpenes and people recognizing how that actually makes them experience or feel. And so, yes, there is groundswell, there is knowledge. It's just slower than everybody like who's come from um, what I call real cannabis, people who want cannabis to succeed, not just make money. We all are hoping that just change comes faster.
Yeah. So I'm gonna take those points, and Greg, this is a question from the audience. So next year you're planting your crop. How important is it? So kind of to Alex's comments and a little bit of Aron, how important is it for your genetic selection? Is this something you look at on a regular basis to make sure that A, it grows in your area, and B, you're hitting the right market with, you know, Aron adding that now they're looking at terpenes and certain terpenes. Is this something that affects your planning for genetics?
Oh, absolutely. Um, our breeding program is absolutely core to what to our success. Our first year, we started in with 84 different genetics in the field. Um, what we found is to try and grow up to about 6 different genetics. But every year over the winter, we basically are creating probably about 50 or 60, let's say, new genetic forms. And then every summer or every season, we're putting in about 2 to 2,500 plants, specifically in R&D, and looking at typically anywhere up to from 20 to 50 plants per, let's call it pheno, and we're constantly searching and trying to make it better, bigger, stronger, faster, and more adaptable to our microclimate. And as
Hmm.
Alex was saying before, what is absolutely essential for us is that, we have a good portion of our crop come ready at the end of August, come ready in the second week of September, come ready by the end of September and then October, because we know that we don't know what's going to happen after October the 15th.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, I've grown my 4 plants in my backyard, and I like to think that I can grow, decent cannabis for myself. I've always enjoyed it, and there's 3 years in a row where I have these beautiful plants until the last 3 4 weeks, and then I just couldn't finish them on time and got bud rot. So yeah, there is always a challenge about growing, but just quickly, we're getting to the end of it. Um, have we swayed you, Greg? Because one of an anonymous question is, if you plan for next year, are you going to fresh freeze everything, or are you going to hang dry a little bit?
I don't know about hang dry. I'd like to find a different,
Or
faster,
dry?
safer drying. Put it this way, we've invested so deeply into this. I appreciate Alex and his position where he's in. My hole is very deep. And so, absolutely, if I had a spare $500,000, I would be putting it into
Drying.
some drying, let's say, equipment. It's
Gotcha.
you need to be able to move your product in a number of different directions and get it out there.
Get it
Because
out the door. Yeah.
dried flower is what is demanded, and also if I can actually start doing infused pre-rolls with live rosin, sour blueberry and sour blueberry flour. There's different combinations that you can do that's from your farm, and you can play with these, let's say, different SKUs.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. So I'm going to go around the table with this last question. So if the consensus, we kind of all agree that quality isn't just THC. I mean, really, it isn't a quality marker. That's just it has nothing to do with quality. But so how do the panelists think they can influence or educate the industry on this market? Like what else? And this no long-winded question answers here. I'll start with Aron. What else can we do? You said your platform has that selection of terps, for example. What else can we do to influence this to bring this production? Because our market, our supply and demand is battling constantly. We need to look at pricing. We need to look at availability and yeah, quality. So what do you think needs to be done to keep pushing this conversation more than the four of us here?
Well, I think there has to be outlets for sale. So I think that's an area where we can help. We on the site you can also toggle sun grown. Actually, so there's like an icon that you
Excellent.
could choose sun grown flower. And this year we plan to bring lots of different outdoor farmers to market, and we will be doing things like pre-rolls so people can try it, or 1 gram so people can try it basically,
Mm-hmm.
and then different size formats, and there'll be higher end, there'll be organic or not organic, there'll be more value. So we do hope to offer a wide array. Also, we tell the story of the farmer. So there's a number of awesome blogs and information pieces on the site that you could access already, including a story about Greg and Cedar and their family story, which is super interesting and fun to think. And so that's what we'll do is we're going to keep blowing the horn and offering and hopefully have people come and make their own decision themselves.
Excellent. I love it. So Greg, want to add to this because you see the market shifting. So what else do we need to do, or what can we keep doing to bring this message forward that outdoor weed is actually can be of higher quality even. So what else can we do in this? Like how else can we push this factor?
Yeah, I guess, from my perspective, from a very practical point of view, with outdoor farms in many cases, and I talk to a lot of farmers here in Canada. I'm sure it's probably different in the US. We're dealing with some fundamental issues like, for example, in BC, cannabis is not considered a farming activity. So
Mm,
you have no access to government programs. I actually have a $120,000 tax bill that if I grew any other plant, I would not have. And that, so the regulatory environment, the government attitude towards this, and the stigma, it permeates to Farm Credit Canada, to the banks. So we can't survive. It's
gotcha.
very hard to survive. The second thing then is, when you have provincial buyers, bureaucrats, a small group of people dictating what 700 retailers are buying, it's wrong. The
Yeah.
retailer should be dictating what is being demanded, not some gatekeeper. And
Yeah.
so, and then the final thing that I alluded to before is I think we actually need some type of industry association or watchdog that actually will, set a series of standards. So there is, this is what live hash rosin is. If you're going to infuse it
Very
with
interesting.
distillate, you got to call it
Yeah.
differently. And and
A
and it's
set
and
of
it's the same
standards to
bubble hash and everything because
yeah.
the consumer just doesn't know. All they see is, oh, it's 50%, but one is $2 and one is $6. And so, of course, you know
Hmm.
what they're going to go after. So, those are my three, let's say, practical things of from an outdoor point of view of trying to be successful.
Alex, you have a fat 30 seconds before. So, what are your thoughts on keeping that message? Like, how do we get that message out to promote these outdoor growers to be at the same level?
I mean, I think the consumer needs to find dispensaries and brands that actually produce it, and they land their plane at the end of the day. They have a quality product because there's
Yeah,
definitely dispensaries that will sell horrible indoor material, and their excuse of why it sucks, oh, it's outdoor. That's what they just tell the
yeah,
consumer.
yeah.
So that, but really, it was something that failed with mold. It's a lower quality product, and also box is something Marcus taught me about. It's volatile organic compounds. That's something I think consumers should look into, and that'll hopefully convince them why. If I showed you a strawberry that lasted 20 years versus this
Yeah,
one that's going to go
yeah.
bad next week, you're not going to eat the one that's going to last 20 years. And that's the same thing with distillate and a lot of those byproducts that we're never going to make and have no part of whatsoever. And hopefully more
Excellent.
consumers join.
Well, thank you all. This is time. I mean, I have another 10, 15 questions in the chat. This has been the most activity we've had with our audience. But to answer one quick question, do you have an Instagram page, etc., to know you better? All the panelists, including myself, you can find that. You can click on all our profiles on the invite of CANNA to get more information and connect with all of us. This was a very insightful conversation. Thank you all. We do see that there is excellent product coming from the outdoor. There is a gap in our industry currently that could be filled with this outdoor production. And we need to get this message out. And I'm glad that, Greg, we're going to get you a little bit some dry product. And if anybody in Canada is looking to have some conversations about outdoor product, how to move it, obviously, Aron just mentioned that he's very interested in doing so. And for the US people, I'm sure Alex would love to have these conversations. So I want to thank everybody, this panelists especially, our media company that helped support us behind us, and the CANNA team. So thank you very much to everybody. And this is it for our session.